Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is the Thursday night Southern California meeting for a fellowship of men and women interested in emotional sobriety. My name is Alan Berger, and I am the host of this group. We are a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other so that we may discover how to live a better life. The only requirement for membership is a desire to be here. There are no dues or fees for membership. We're not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, institution, or other 12-step group, and we do not wish to engage in any controversy. We neither endorse nor oppose any causes. Our primary purpose is to help ourselves and to help others understand and achieve emotional sobriety. We come together because we realize that we share a common problem. Bill Wilson identified emotional dependence as an impediment to his emotional maturity. He realized that his dependence on people and circumstances for his emotional security and self-esteem was a basic flaw that needed to be addressed. We recognize that emotional dependency is toxic and harmful to our lives. It is based on the erroneous belief that we are okay only if things turn out the way we think they are supposed to be. Well, we have found this to be utter nonsense. In fact, the real truth is that no real happiness can be attained until we surrender our crippling expectations about how life is supposed to be and learn how to cope with life on life's terms. This meeting focuses on issues related to our emotional sobriety. We come together to explore and discover new possibilities in our lives. We believe that it is possible to overcome our emotional dependency and surrender the unreasonable expectations and unenforceable rules that arise from our unhealthy dependence. Brian will now read a portion of Bill's AA Grapevine article called The Next Frontier, Emotional Sobriety.
All right, my name is Brian. I think that many oldsters who have put our booze gear to severe but successful tests still find that they often lack emotional sobriety. Perhaps they will be the spearhead for the next major development in AA, the development of much more real maturity and balance, which is to say humility, in our relations with ourselves, with our fellows, and with God. Those adolescent urges that so many of us have for top approval, perfect security, and perfect romance, urges quite appropriate to age 17, prove to be an impossible way of life when we are at age 47 or 57. Here is the aha moment that Bill experienced. Suddenly I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence, on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I had fought for them, and when defeat came, so did my depression. The solution Bill discovered was that if we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root of it some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We may then be able to 12-step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety.
Well, thank you, Brian. Tonight, we're going to continue our exploration of the 12 steps and how they help us achieve emotional sobriety. I'm going to discuss step 5 here for about 20 minutes, and then Thom is going to be the discussant for this evening's share. And then we will open it up for the last half an hour to a discussion on step 5. So let me start by once again reviewing the process that's taking place. It's very important to understand that the steps are sequential and interdependent, which means what happens in one step creates an energy, right? A force that now compels us and sets us up, if you will, for what's going to happen in the step to follow. When we talked about step 1, that it created this existential crisis, that we realized that what we were doing in our life wasn't working, that it was destructive to us. but we had no alternative. We didn't know what to do. So we were kind of stuck, right? In between that rock and a hard place, as the Rolling Stones called it, right? So what happens is, as you sit in this existential crisis, you're going to, of course, experience some existential anxiety. It needs to be resolved. We need to feel something. Something needs to happen in our life to point us in the right direction. And that's where step 2 comes along, and we get hope. Step 2 is about hope, that there is a new possibility. And I really like to think of recovery as the discovery of new possibilities in our life. And that's what's happening, right? We are really being, told that there's a different way. We don't have to just keep doing what we're doing, that there's another possibility out there. So now step 2 resolves the existential crisis in step 1, but now now the charge is, what's this new way of life? How am I going to get that in my life? How do I wrap my hands around that? And so that energy moves us to step 3. And we've talked about step 3 as making that commitment, right? Making a decision, right? To turn, right? To this discovery of a new possibility in our life. So now in step 3, we make that decision, but a decision without any action is not going to go anywhere, right? And that's what we learned, that hope without a commitment is not going to change our lives. And making a commitment without following up with action is not going to change our lives. And that's what we did in step 4, right? It was our first tangible evidence of our commitment to a new way of life, our commitment to discovering some new possibilities. So we take step 4, and I love what Father Martin says. He says, the next steps, 6 steps 4 and 5, 6 and 7, 7 and 8 are paired. That in step 4, you're reflecting, you're contemplating, you're preparing yourself to take an action in the next step. And that's where we're at now. We're executing what we've prepared ourselves to do in step 4. So step 5 is it's a fascinating step in many ways. Especially me as a psychologist, I love this step. Admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So here, this step, we take what we've learned about our self in step 4, and we share it with someone else. I want you to think about this step as really developing a relationship with someone that I will call an enlightened witness. Someone that can sit with you and hear from you what's been going on in your life and help you see things that you might not have been able to see without that feedback. And this becomes incredibly important. And we'll talk about that more next time. But I just want to talk about the first part of this is actually that commitment to share with someone else. You see, for most of us, that's something that we didn't do. We didn't want to expose ourselves to someone else because we so feared their judgment. We so feared the self-hate that would come up in us if we started to expose all that we were to someone else. Because remember, we adopted our false self because we didn't believe that we were enough as we were, that we had to be someone else to be okay. So now when I'm asked to open myself up to you and to expose myself to you and to open my heart up to you, that's a big ask. I love how Bill starts out this step in the 12 and 12. He goes, all of AA's 12 steps ask us to go contrary to our natural desires. I want you to think of it this way. All of the steps ask us to go contrary to our false self. They all deflate our ego. They all shatter our reliance on our false self. That's what these steps are doing. So when it comes to ego deflation, he goes, few steps are harder to take than step 5. So this is the importance of this. This is we are now being committed, in my opinion, to discovering who we really are. And that's where the enlightened witness comes in. is instead of us now seeing ourselves as defective, when we really share this with someone that's an enlightened witness, we realize that we're just a human, being. And that what we've done wrong, and I put that in quotes, is not the result of us of somewhat of an innate, defective character in us, but was merely an adaptation to what we were dealing with in our life. And that we came up with the best solution we could possibly come up with. An enlightened witness will help us have a greater sense of self-acceptance than we've ever had in our life. And the liberty and the emotional freedom that comes from this cannot be understated. It's an incredibly powerful experience to be able to sit and share yourself with someone else and talk about things you never thought you would share with another person in your whole life. And not only not get the reaction you thought you would get, but get a reaction that's 180 degrees out from what you could have imagined. When I took this step with my sponsor, Thom, nobody had ever responded to me the way that he did. I call that a corrective emotional experience. And so that's what's happening with this step as well, is we are having a corrective emotional experience. We are now realizing that having an authentic relationship with another human being is not only important, but it's therapeutic. It is incredibly powerful to be authentic with someone else and have them respond to us from that same place of authenticity. I mean, I was incredibly liberated when I would share what was going on with me. And here I thought I was the only person that experienced this. And then Thom says, I want to tell you about my experience. And all of a sudden he starts sharing something that was so similar to what I experienced. We call that universality. We start to realize that our experience is very, very common to other people. So Bill goes on in this step. He says, certain distressing or humiliating memories, we tell ourselves, ought not to be shared with anyone. These, we say to ourselves, will remain secret. Not a soul must ever know. We hope they'll go to the grave with us. And that's what our false self told us. That's what our false self demanded from these things. But Bill goes on in this chapter, and he goes, what are we likely to receive from step 5? For one thing, we shall get rid of that terrible sense of isolation that we've always had. Almost without exception, we are tortured by loneliness. Even before our drinking got bad and people began to cut us off, nearly all of us suffered from the feeling that we didn't quite belong. You see, and that was the problem to begin with, is that feeling that we didn't quite belong, that feeling that we weren't going to be loved, that we weren't going to be accepted, that we didn't belong, is what generated the force inside of us that got us to adopt a false self as a solution. And it was a solution for a while. It got us out of where we were at. I mean, it gave us some hope that there was another possibility, but it was hope that was not based on a solid foundation. It was hope that was based on a delusion that we could be someone that we weren't, and that we had to be someone we weren't to be okay. That's what's happening in this step. So it's incredibly powerful. I just want to read a few other things that I've underlined in this chapter before I turn this over to Thom. Bill goes on to say, until we had talked with complete candor of our conflicts and had listened to someone else do the same things, we still didn't belong. Step 5 was the answer. It was the beginning of true kinship with man and with God of our understanding. So now we start joining the ranks of being a human, being. right? It's now we have a community like we've never had before. I mean, that's what many of us are finding on this Thursday night when we get together and we start to talk about, since we're focused on emotional sobriety here, we're talking about our emotional dependence. And, and all of us here can relate to the fact that, my God, my self-esteem was so dependent on everyone else and how everyone else treated me. And so now we're coming together and we're sharing that with each other, and we're looking for a solution to that. Well, it's a remarkable thing to now finally become part of that community. Bill goes on to say, often it was while working on this step with our sponsors or spiritual advisors or whoever else was our enlightened witness that we first truly was able to forgive others, no matter how deeply we felt they had wronged. What we had realized is that all around forgiveness was desirable, but it was only when we resolutely tackled step 5 that we inwardly knew we'd be able to receive forgiveness and give it to. Because you see, I cannot forgive someone else until I've forgiven myself. I cannot accept someone else as they are until I've accepted myself as I am. I can't give you something I don't have. And none of us have learned to enjoy and to encourage the full expression of ourselves because of all of these ideas about who we were supposed to be and how we were supposed to act. We call it the tyranny of the shoulds, and it tyrannizes our life like nothing else. He goes, to those who have made progress in this area, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are. I want you to hear that. It results in a clear recognition of what and who we truly are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. Wow, what a great vision, huh? What a great vision. In Gestalt therapy, we talk about the paradoxical theory of change, is that change occurs when I own what I'm doing completely. I take 100% responsibility for what I'm doing, for the existence that I've created in my life. And as soon as I do that, change becomes possible. And that's what Bill intuitively seemed to know. This step is paradoxical. As soon as I own who I am, now some possibilities open up about who I can be. Now I can explore some other possibilities. I'm no longer what I call fixed by my behavior. So this begins our discussion of step 5. I'm going to turn it over to Thom now for a 10-minute reflection on this, and then we'll open it up for you guys to share your experience with this step or your insight into it. So Thom,
Yo,
all yours.
all right. My name's Thom. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a recovering mini asshole. Lots of things. Thank you, Alan. It's my wife was just asking me a minute ago. She said, so as you guys are going through these steps, does it feel like does it really feel like you're going back through them? And she said it in such a way, like, am I kind of going over on the surface, or am I going back through them? And I was saying, it really is, and I feel immersed in it in terms of what we're doing. And I think that, and one of the things I love about it so much, Alan, is your emphasis on the interconnectedness. And it's like, and one experience I'm having, and I realized this, I had this thought just today about where we are at step 5, is I've got this, I'm a very visual person. And so I have this idea that we're going inward. And at 4, I talked about this step 4, we talked about that's the first step of active step of emotional sobriety. Now we move into step 5. And I realized at step 4, we're at the center. And now we're going to start to move back out, because now we're in this deep reflection. We're in this place for the first time in step 4, where we're looking at who we really are as best we can. And each time we visit this place, and it's, I always point out to people, you don't just do the steps one time and say, well, we've all known people who do that. They say, well, I finished the steps, and brush off their hands, and that's asking for it. But but with step 5, we begin to move out. And so we're all the way inside. We've already begun the process of trusting somebody. The enlightened witness. I love that term. It's whoever that may be. But we're going to take that challenge a step farther, another step farther in step 5. And that is, the challenge is say it all. It's one of the things I say to my clients sometimes, because there's kind of in therapy, as you know, Alan, that it's kind of a constant step 5. It's like in part of the building trust thing is when somebody, and a lot of times people will find that it's easier when you first go to therapy to share things that are potentially that feel shameful or feel bad and stuff like that than it is to share later on as you get into therapy. And they get confused by what that is. And the reason that is because you begin to care what the therapist thinks. When the therapist is a stranger, you actually can't. It's sort of like going to the priest and just through the screen saying your sins. But it's like the more, and I've been on both sides of that in terms of as a therapist, been there, but I've also been there as a client, and go like, I really care what this person thinks of me. And of course, that becomes the bigger challenge. That's that place where, what I'll tell people is, I have one client right now going through this in a big way, that just the challenge is, if the saboteur in your voice, in your head, the voice in your head is telling you, don't tell Thom this, that's what you tell me. Whatever it is, it's like, it's almost like I give some people the assignment. I say, get a pad of paper and ask that voice in your head, what should I not ever tell anybody? And just have them and write them all down, and then bring them to your 5th step, because that's what you need to tell. And it's like, and it brings us to that place that you talk about when you're talking about with your sponsor, Thom, that emotional corrective experience, that's truly experiential therapy. It's the ultimate challenge. Man, it's like, I'm going to say this thing that I am almost sure that is going to make you cringe, you turn from me, or I'll never hear from you again. I'm going to say this stuff. And then it's a big challenge. But the other big challenge is, I wrote down while you were talking, it's like, we get to that place. If you only knew this about me, you would not care for me. If you only knew this about me, you would know I was bad. It's like, but the bigger one is, for a lot of people, what happens if that person responds like Thom did to you, or like other people have to me, like we have to other people? What happens, what's the scariest thing? When you look up and the person is simply smiling at you and saying, and you just look at them. I mean, you see it in AA all the time. You share shit that you think is like, this is horrible. And you look up and you see these strange nodding heads. I just told you this horrible secret of mine. And it's like, and then you go like, yeah, I did that 5 times last week. It's like, it's like, you're not alone anymore. That's what this does. And it's like, and by talking about how it happens in other ways, like in therapy or just in a regular AA meeting, I'm not trying to take away from the sacredness of step 5, because I think it is a sacred step. And finding that person, letting that stuff out, letting that in, it's an exorcism. But it's not an exorcism of what we have thought we needed an exorcism of. It's an exorcism of believing in. I always have my little should monster, that I had surgically removed all those years ago. I bring him with me. That voice in your head that says, you're not enough, you're bad, you're never enough. It's not an exorcism of him. It's an exorcism of me believing these horrible messages about myself. And then one of the things you and I've talked about a few times, Alan, is if we're being realistic about this, it didn't go do step 5. It doesn't, it's a cathartic experience, but if it's the first time you've done it, then okay, it's a start. And one of the things you do at this point is you become aware of what Alan and I have called reasonable doubt. Sometimes it's enough just to be able to go, maybe, just possibly, I'm not the total piece of shit that I've thought I was. It's a possibility now. Now if you're somebody who's got a lot more out of that, then please ignore that. If you've gone a lot farther than that, but it's like, even that, I want people to know, we talk about the lowered expectations. If you can get to that place where I always say, where I can say, like, I may not be a complete idiot all the time. Okay, there's a lot of qualifiers in that sentence, but it's like, I promise you, that's an improvement about where I was before I ever encountered step 5 for the first time. So this is a place where we begin to consider the possibility that we have been wrong about ourselves all along. So, and I'm thanks.
And which is an interesting way to think about, sharing the exact nature of our wrongs, right?
I never thought about that. You're exactly right. That's where we're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong about you.
That's right. See, a lot of people don't put that together when they're doing this, but the exact nature of our wrongs is how wrong we've been about ourselves. Absolutely. And about who we are and our possibilities. See,
that's it.
That needs to be part of the experience that you're having.